Hello, everyone, and welcome to Michael Clement Music. Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can use upper structures in 2-5-1 progressions. And if you are a beginning or an intermediate jazz pianist, you've probably heard about upper structures before. You probably don't really know how to use them effectively. You may have played a few of them on a few, you may have learned a few things from different YouTube videos, but hopefully in this video we're going to show you first of all how to understand upper structure triads in a way that hopefully won't be very overwhelming for you, so you can just see how they work, what they're used for, and then later we're going to show you ways to actually use them, because sometimes when you're learning a really complex topic or something that's more complex for you, such as upper structure triads, it may be easy to just focus on that one thing and not really know how to incorporate it into a lot of different places. And so, of course, the first place we always try to incorporate or use new knowledge that we have are on 2-5-1 chord progressions. So like I said, first thing we're going to do, try to understand upper structure triads in a really thoughtful, step-by-step way. And then as we go through that, then I'm going to show you how most people describe upper structure triads and the different options that there are, and then finally how to actually find ways to use upper structure triads in 2-5-1 chord progressions. So let's go ahead and get started. So, the first thing that I usually teach when I'm teaching any beginning jazz pianist or aspiring jazz pianist is the 7th chord. We usually start with 7th chords, with the right hand usually playing the full 7th chord in root position. And this may be something that's fairly familiar to you or maybe new, but what's interesting to see here is that I am playing a C major 7 chord. However, if we look closer, we're actually going to find different chords that are built within this chord. So I could think about this as C major 7, starting with the C, and I'm building a C major, and then I'm adding the 7. Another way I could think about this is as an E minor chord that's built on top of a C. And so this is kind of the simplest version of what an upper structure triad is. It's just we're looking for patterns to find different ways to structure chords, or with different ways to think about chords. So even if I look at this D minor 7 here, I can think about this as D, F, and A, which is the D minor, and then I add a 7. Or I can think about it as F major on top of a D. Okay? And as we go through and learn the different 7th chords, you're going to find a lot of these different examples. For example, on an F half diminished chord, or an F minor 7 flat 5, we have F, A flat, C flat or B, and then E flat. But if I look closer, same thing. I can find a triad that is on the top, that doesn't start with the root, right? And in this case, it's A flat minor over F, right? And so this isn't usually what people are talking about when they're talking about upper structure triads, but I just want you to think about it in a little bit of a different way and just start to see those connections. And even on your own, if you're practicing on your own and you're looking at some different chords, if you have any other notes beside just the triad, see if you can find other relationships between the chords. If I do an E major 7, right, looks like my piano roll isn't active, so let me just get that really quick. Hopefully, let me reset that. There we are. Great. So on an E major 7, right, I have the D sharp on top, and I'm just looking for patterns, right? On the top here, I have G sharp minor, these 3 notes, and then I'm putting that over an E, okay? So once again, we are just looking at 7th chords and seeing the different relationships that we can draw. And this is really all that music theory is. All we're doing is finding relationships between things. In really basic music theory, it's really focused on notation, and as we get more advanced, we're starting to draw relationships between chords. And in a lot of jazz theory, we're focused on the types of chords that jazz musicians play and the patterns that come up when we listen to the music and different things that we notice. And in the case of upper structure triads, really we're trying to find easier ways to understand complex chords. And so the idea of upper structure triads comes from this. So if I'm just going to the 7th, like I said, we can think about it going from the root, or we can just think about a triad that's on the top with a bass note. But if I am doing a larger chord, such as maybe a 9th chord, maybe a D minor 9, we can start to see a lot of different relationships between these chords. So we can see, what the chord symbol is, which is D minor with an added 7th and an added 9th. Or I can also see an F major, right, kind of nestled in the middle of the chord between the root and the 9th. I can see that F major chord. I can also see an A minor chord on the top, okay, with the D and the F on the bottom, right? Let's take a dominant chord, right? We have maybe an E flat 9 chord. The notes in this chord are E flat, G, B flat, D flat, and hopefully I'm probably going to make mistakes as I'm saying all these notes, but you're welcome to put it in the chat if we have anyone showing up. So we have E flat, G, B flat, D flat, and F. And I just want you to look at the relationships between these different chords and the different notes that are here. So if we just look at this chord, yeah, the name of the chord is E flat 9 or E flat 7 with an added 9. But we can also see a B flat minor that's on top, right? We can also see a G diminished triad that's in the middle, right? And if we put all these 4 top notes and just think about that as being the top, we can also think of it as a G half diminished chord that's stuck on top of an E flat. So once again, we're just trying to build chords and see different relationships between them. And when the chords start to get larger and larger, it starts to become really necessary that we think about the chords in terms of their upper structure relationship, especially as pianists, as we have 2 hands and a really easy way to think about structuring more complex chords is having our left hand cover the fundamental parts of a chord and the right hand covering the color tones of the chord. So, for example, I can just take this, I can take a C major 9, right? And and this probably isn't going to be a very characteristic jazz voicing, but I could play C, E, G in the left hand, and then I can play the 7th and the 9th in my right hand, right? I can also do it a little bit differently where I maybe play the root 3rd and 7th in my left hand, and then I play the 9th and the 5th in my right hand. So as we start to build chords that are beyond the 5th, we start to need to divide and conquer the chord. And the way that jazz musicians often do this is by starting to kind of codify different upper structure triads that we really commonly see on different chords, specifically dominant chords. So dominant chords are interesting because there are so many options for dominant chords. If I'm playing a dominant chord, the interesting thing is that there are so many options for tension notes. So if I'm just going up to the ninth, we have our flat nines, we have our natural nines, and we have our sharp nines. As for the fifths, we could do a flat 5, we could do a natural 5, we could also do a sharp 5, and we could do any combinations of the above, right? So we could do flat 5 and sharp 9, right? We could do sharp 5 and flat 9. These are all completely valid ways to play a dominant chord. And we are going to get into specific upper structure triads, but I just want you to notice as I'm playing this one, we were looking for relationships between different chords earlier when we were looking at just major chords or minor chords up to the 7th or to the 9th. But now we have something that we have a flat 5, or you could also think about this as a sharp 11. And we have a flatted 7th, and we have a sharp 9. And you might not think initially of thinking of this as a triad, right? But if I'm just looking at it, what is my right hand actually playing? So I'm playing a third in this C7 flat 5 sharp 9, right? I'm playing the third with my thumb, but the rest of my hand is playing an E flat minor triad, right? And so this is a relationship that we can start to define. And so we're going to kind of tackle these one by one as I kind of naturally come upon them. But and I'll make this a little bit bigger. But if I have, and let's do this one. If I have so come up with this here. If I have a C, E, B flat, and then I have an E, and then I'm going to make this a G flat, not an F sharp. So I have an E natural, and then I have a G flat, B flat. And I guess I'll leave that one out, and an E flat on top. This top bit actually looks a lot like an E flat minor triad. And so this is just something that you can, once again, we're just looking for patterns. And we are just noticing, wow, I have this really interesting chord that has an E flat minor triad on the top of a C7. Very interesting sound. It's a little bit I don't know if creepy is the right word. It's a little bit ominous, right? And each one of these different patterns that you can use or that you find is going to have a little bit of a different feeling. Okay, so once again, this is a C7 with an E flat minor triad on the top. So I'm going root 7 third, and then I'm going, it's just E flat minor. It even takes me a lot longer to tell you what the names of the chord notes are, but basically it's a flat 5, a flat 7, and then a sharp 9. Takes me a lot longer to tell you what the chord tones are than it is to find the triad that's on top. And that's part of why jazz pianists talk about upper structure triads. There are ways to have these really complex, interesting chords without having to every single time you play that chord, think about every single color tone that you're playing. And so this one we would call the flat 3 minor upper structure. Now that isn't really a technical term. Even I wouldn't say that pianists are like, maybe somewhere there's pianists talking about all the different options, but there are usually, when we're talking about upper structure triads, there are the major options, meaning the major chords that we can use on top of dominant chords that are upper structure triads, and then there's the minor options. So let's find some others, right? So and we'll stick with the minors to start with. Usually we start with the majors, but we started with the minors. So we're gonna keep going with it. So another combination of color tones that we can use in dominant chords, and again, a lot of these upper structures that we usually talk about are with dominant chords, because dominant chords are just so complex. So another one is where I have a sharp 11 and then a natural 13, which is the A, and then a C sharp. Right, very interesting sound. And I can take this triad that's on top, and notice this is actually an F sharp minor triad. I can actually spread it out a little bit more. Let me go back to this view so you can see. But this is such an interesting sound. It's a very complex sound. We might not know where to use it, which is fine for now. But here's our second option for upper structure minor triads. And so on our sheet here, we have the same root, third, and seventh on bottom. In fact, I will rewrite it because I'm voicing it slightly differently. So I'm doing the root, the seventh, and then the third. And I'm going to put... right now I'm playing it with my left hand. You could absolutely play it with your right hand if you can, depending on which is easier for you to reach. And then I have an A natural, a C sharp, and then an F sharp, right? So if you came upon this in the wild... now, it's a much more organic process for you to be exploring and to discover these. I remember probably when I was a teenager, I don't think I learned all of these just by reading it out of a textbook or anything. I think I was exploring, and I happened upon these chords. And there were a few that I had started using because I had just started building chords up and up and up, and I started seeing these connections. I think probably the first one I came up with, or that I came across, was this one, which is a D major on top of a C7, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But I think this was one of the first ones that I became familiar with, and I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know that it had a name, right? And then later, when I started learning more about jazz theory, I came across it, and I said, "Oh, I use that," right? So it's a much more organic process if you can explore and find some of these relationships on your own. But but I of course want to help you understand it if you are coming across it the first time, and maybe you haven't explored these. So this is just kind of a jumping off point to start seeing some relationships here. I am seeing that we have at least a couple of people who have tuned in. So if you have tuned in, if you are tuning in, make sure to just put your questions in the chat. I'd love to hear from you, since this is my very first live stream, and there probably are not going to be that many people that tune in for this first one. Feel free to put some questions in the chat. I'd love to help out. Once again, we're covering how to use upper structures in 2-5-1 chord progressions, and we're not quite there yet. We're still building up upper structure triads. We're understanding what are some different ways that we can understand them in a more effective way. So we just came up with our second one, and I was just showing you through some options of minor triads that that you can put on top of dominant chords. This one is F sharp minor, and I'm putting these from C7 just because it'll be easier to remember them if you don't have to transpose as you're doing it. Let's see, F sharp. I spelled that wrong. So F sharp minor, right? And this one we would call a flat 5. In this case, I'm going to call it a sharp 4 minor upper structure, meaning that I'm on a C7 chord and I'm finding the sharp 4 of that chord, which is the F sharp, and then I'm building a minor triad on the top of it. Right? This is really helpful because then when you go to other keys, when you go to other chords, you can remember it. So I can do the same thing if I go to an E7, right? And I'm thinking, how do I make this? Well, what's the sharp 4? Right? So if I'm finding the sharp 4, I have E, maybe F sharp, and then G sharp is the third. If I want to find the sharp 4, it would be A sharp or B flat. So now I can put a minor triad on that B flat minor. Really crunchy, interesting chord. Right? And that's our chord. And what it is I'm going to go back to the C7, but it's C7, and I'll go a little bit further in here so you can see more clearly. And let's go to this guy. So we have a C7, right? We have our 7th. Oh, gotta get that back. So we have our root, our 7th, our 3rd, a 13th, which is this A, right? And the reason we call it that is because it usually doesn't happen all the way down here. It usually only happens up higher. And so if we're doing that, we would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So that's why we usually call it 13th. And then we have a flat 9. I know I have it spelled as a C sharp. Technically flat 9 would be D flat, but I'm wanting to spell it like the chord, like the upper structure triad. And then finally we have our sharp 11. So that is our sharp 4 minor upper structure triad. And we've been going through this kind of finding different color tones and then finding the relationships between them. But there is another way that you can experiment with these. And basically you can just play your C7 or your root 3rd and 7th. We'll leave out the 5th because the 5th could be sharped or flatted. So we're going to leave out the 5th there. But if I just played minor triads, right? Here's this one. And before you play something and you really don't like it, I think this isn't a great voicing here, but I think it's nice when I leave out the C here. And you could even put this down an octave. Let me go back to this guy. And this is a classic sound, right? Right. So that is a classic sound when it comes to funk music, right? And even a lot of times that's used as a one chord, meaning we continually go back to this feeling, right? So that would be a minor 1 upper structure triad. So I've got C minor, essentially C minor, and I won't. I'll start to go a little bit quicker with these. And then if you have questions, you're welcome to put it in the chat. Even if it's after the fact, if you have questions that you'd like to put in the chat, I'd love to either do a follow-up live stream or I'll make a video about it, helping out with some of these questions that you have. So basically I'm putting C minor on top of a C7 chord, right? And that's what we're coming up with here. And then I could just go through the scale and see what other options we have. And I'll tell you which ones we usually don't use, and which ones we do, and why. So this first one we use a lot. Right, so that's C minor over C7. We also have this really interesting one that's used all the time, which is C sharp minor over C7. And this is interesting because the middle note or the third of the C sharp minor lines up with the third of the C7. Right? And so this one, C sharp minor over C7, it ends up being a C7 flat 9 with a flat 13. You could also think about this as a sharp 5. But that's basically what it is. And then as we keep going up, now this one, D minor over C7, it's really not used that much at all because we have this E that is very violently clashing with our F above. Right? So not very common at all. There might be some specific place where an arranger may choose to use this chord, but for the most part, we're not using this one. So this one isn't one that we typically use. If we continue on, E flat minor, that's the first one that we actually came up with, right? E flat minor over C7. All right, the next one would be E minor, and this one, once again, we don't use this one hardly at all because we have a major 7 over a flatted 7. It really just doesn't sound that good. So moving on, the F minor we also don't use very much because once again, any chord with that F in it above the E, which is the third of the C7, we're not really going to like that. They don't get along very well. So continuing on to the F sharp minor, we saw this one before. So F sharp minor over C7. This is a great voicing. Right? Getting a little bit ahead of myself, but this is a great one. These can be some beautiful resolutions. Right, so some great ones with the F sharp minor. We do have G minor, right? G minor. This is a much more basic upper structure triad, and we usually don't even consider it an upper structure triad because it's really just the 5th, 7th, and the 9th, right? So if we were just playing our C9, the G minor is already just there, right? Still a beautiful sound. But it is a simpler sound and probably used a lot more than the other ones. But we don't usually consider this an upper structure triad because it just sounds, it's just a C9, right? So so far the pattern that we're looking for is that usually in our upper structure triads we're avoiding the natural 4, which for C7 would be this F, and then we're also avoiding the raised 7th. It just doesn't really work with these dominant chords, and that's kind of the rule of thumb that you'll have as you go throughout these options. Other than that, basically everything goes. But as we're looking for these patterns and as you're experimenting, you can start to see the ones that work and the ones that don't. And it's mostly going to be the ones that have Fs or 4ths, and then the ones that have raised 7ths that do not work. But all of the other ones work great. I think. I'll go through them. Right, so that one has an F, doesn't work very well. That one has a B, doesn't work very well. This one has an F, doesn't work very well. Right, now we have this one has a B, and it doesn't work very well. It has the raised 7th. And then we have A minor. And this one is a beautiful sound. And this is probably one of the first ones that you should learn. But this one, basically you have a root and a third that are on top, and really all you're adding is that 13th. But you should still explore this sound. It's a little bit simpler of a sound than some of the other ones we've been looking at, but much more usable in every context. Almost every dominant chord you can add a 13th on, and no one's gonna turn around at you and be like, why are you playing all these extensions, right? So that A minor is great. And then these last two don't really work very well, which is B flat minor and B minor, right? So from the minor options we have, go a little closer, we have the 1 minor. We have, for this I'm going to call it sharp 1. It's usually how I think of it. It could also be flat 2 minor, but for a lot of keys, sharp 1 makes more sense. We have the sharp 1 minor. We have the flat 3 minor. We have flat 5 minor. And then, am I missing any? And then we kind of have our honorable mentions, right? Which are we'll call them honorable mentions, are our 5 minor, which is basically it's just a dominant 9th. I'm just putting X because we don't know what key. But we have the 5 minor and the 6 minor, right? Which would be our 13th chord. Right, and I'll put the qualities of these ones up here. So we have kind of X7 or whatever key it is with a sharp 9. Sharp 1 would be our 7th with a flat 9 and I'll put a sharp 5. I think it's a little easier to understand. And then our 3 minor would be a sharp 9, sharp 11, and that's it. Oop. And then our flat 5 is our sharp. Let's see, I guess this has a 13th. And oof, this one's loaded. This one has a flat 9, a sharp 11, and a 13th. This one's packed. Right, which is our flat 5 minor. Right? So as you're seeing this, it's like, well, of course we're going to learn these upper structure triads, because how else would you understand it? I mean, even it's taking me a little bit of time to come up with the extensions for each one, and that's why we learn them. We learn the pattern, right, and then we learn them in different 2-5-1s, and then we can get comfortable with them in songs if they work with the melody, right? So here are our minor versions. So we have minor 1. And I'll give you just an example of how you might use this in just a 5-1 without much explanation. Right, here's our 5-1, sharp 9 to, this is an F major 7 with the 13th. We could do our something like this. This is our sharp 1 minor going to an F major chord, and I won't get into the extensions because there's just going to be a lot of different options. And then we have the flat 3 minor, and I think for this one really the sharp 11 stands out. And then for the flat 5 minor, right, let's see if we have, looks like we've got a couple of live viewers. So if you are watching, just make sure to put any questions in your chat. I'm happy to steer this any direction that you'd like, because this is, once again, my first live stream. So thank you for watching. Thanks for being here. I'd love to hear who you are, where you're from, and I'd love to help you out with whatever you're working on. But right now we're understanding some upper structure triads and getting familiar with them. So if there are any questions, please put them in the chat so I can make sure I handle any of these questions. So we actually went a little bit in opposite order than I usually do when teaching upper structure triads, and that's just because we ended up in the wild finding our minor upper structure triads first. But let's now tackle the majors. And you may have heard these before. You may have opened up a book where it has these listed out. And usually if we're talking about upper structure triads, we're talking about the major chords that you can put on top of dominant chords, right? And so for this first one, we have, let's see, let me just make sure I have some, okay, just making sure I have the live chat visible. So this one's probably the first one that I ever discovered, and that's that on a dominant chord, you can put a major chord a whole step up. And this will naturally happen as you just build the dominant chord up. The natural 11th doesn't work because it clashes with the third below, but we have the 7th, 9th, and then we kind of nudge the 11th to the sharp, just a little bit so it doesn't clash so much with the third below. And then finally we land at our 13th. And usually this is this is the first one I learned. I think I just kind of discovered it as I was playing with chords. And so this one's really nice. This one is really effective when you're doing a tritone substitution. So this one, it does resolve down a 5th. I don't find it the most satisfying when I'm going down a 5th. It might be because of some of the resolutions. This is actually used in a lot of different tunes. So let me write that down so you can follow along with it. So we've got, because this one really is very common. It's common in a lot of tunes, and I'll try to think of some examples. So we've got root 3rd 7th, and then we have D major on top, right? And so this is C7 with a 9th, sharp 11th, and a 13th, which is that D major chord on top. And hopefully you can see that fairly well. But this is used a ton in different tunes. Let me give you just a few examples. The first one that came to my mind was Girl from Ipanema. The second chord, which is usually kind of a dominant 9th chord, it's really easy to add that sharp 11 when you're soloing. So let me move this out a little bit. In a big, what we sometimes call a big 2 dominant, right? So in this case, I've got the sharp 11, and I'm playing a G dominant. This is probably a little too quiet. I've got a G dominant that has an A major on the top, right? And so this is giving me that sharp 11 flavor, and then the 13th, and then the 9th. I just thought of a good analogy for a lot of these upper structures. They're really spice blends, right? So if you think about one upper structure, or if you think about one color tone, like a ninth, the ninth has a particular flavor when you put it with a dominant chord, um, and 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 that flavor is there. To some extent, no matter what else is with it, right? You add that flavor, you add the ninth. Now, if I add the sharp 11th, I can add a different flavor, right? If I add the 13th, I can add a third flavor. But what these upper structure triads do a really good job of, it's kind of like you're going to your spice cabinet and you're grabbing your Italian seasoning, and it's got like 4 or 5 different spices, right? And you're just grabbing the thing out of the spice cabinet and you put on your spice blend and it's got all these flavors and you're like, wow, I didn't have to hardly do any work, right? When I'm playing, I'm not always thinking, okay, in fact, I'm usually not going to be thinking, oh, I'm going to add my ninth, I'm going to add my sharp 11th, I'm going to add my 13th. I'm not usually thinking that when I'm playing, but I might be thinking, let's grab the Italian seasoning, right? I'm gonna grab that spice blend and just put the whole blend on there, like poultry seasoning. That could be another spice blend that you grab when you're cooking. So there's just so many of these different patterns that you can use that it can be really helpful. It can be really helpful to break it down into something that's a little bit more manageable, so that you can just have some more colorful options at your disposal, even if you're not an advanced jazz pianist. You're just getting in there. Maybe you to keep with the cooking analogies. I love cooking analogies. Maybe you're not the most experienced cook, but you have a few recipes and you're able to grab this spice blend. Like, I like to cook a lot of like Indian food. So I'll grab the curry seasoning or the curry powder, and that's a spice blend, right? So they just kind of help you solidify some of those sounds in your ears, because some of these chords, they may not be familiar to you. They may be completely new to you, and you may not like the sound when you've just started out with them. Maybe that F sharp minor over the C7 it just doesn't really, you don't really like it, but you start to play it a little bit more. You start to play it in some different tunes, and you can find out places to use it that you really like, that you find really beautiful. And so that's what these upper structure triads do really well. So let's continue on. So we've got this. I did want to tell you one other place where this goes really well, which as I was playing Girl from Ipanema, I found yet another place where this is used in Girl from Ipanema. So if I'm going, right? So this actually, I guess technically, if I'm playing the melody, it doesn't work with this one, because I've got this E on top, which is the 7th instead of the 13th. But if I'm soloing on this, absolutely, I'm definitely going to use that upper structure triad to give me that flavor of the 13th. So this is on a flat 2 dominant chord, right? Which is, if you're familiar with it, that's also the tritone sub. So we're going from G minor to G flat dominant to F, and this A flat major is really common to play right there. Right, so that one's really nice there. Once again, this is the major 2 upper structure triad right? And there are really 5 majors. I guess we found 4 main ones for minor triads, and then we have 5 major ones that are common. And I have to look why there's only 5 instead of more, or why there's only 4 for the minors, but there's 5 for the majors. I don't know, mystery. I'll figure that out someday. So the next one for our major triads, for our upper structure triads, is an E flat major. So same structure on bottom. We have a root third and 7th, and we have E flat major built on top. And this is actually very similar to the 1 minor that we had in the minor versions. There's really only one difference, and they're both chord tones. So if I'm doing 1 minor, right, I've got a sharp 9, a 5th, and then a root. And then instead, if I play the E flat on top, I'm just playing the 7th on the top instead of the root. So same quality, right? I could make a melody kind of uses both of them just by changing the melody. Right, so there's an option for the 3. So this is just C7 sharp 9. And this is the flat 3 major upper structure. Okay, we have 3 more, and then we'll get to some options for 2-5-1s. So the next one that people use a lot is the flat 5. This one always feels very cinematic, very Star Wars to me. All right, that's very Stravinsky Petrushka. And so that's G flat major over a C7. All right, so same thing there. And we have G flat, and then B flat, and then D flat. So this is a sharp 11, and then a 7th, and then a flat 9. All right, so this is the flat 5 major upper structure. All right, especially when you play them together like that. These are the ones that we have so far: 2, 3, and flat 5. It's just a lot of color at once. So that is our 7th. So that's C7 with a flat 9 and a sharp 11. The next one is probably the most common of all of the upper structure triads, at least for 5 chords. And it is the flat 6 upper structure triad. So we have flat 6 upper structure, which is A flat. It's an A flat triad. And I have it kind of voiced weird here, but I'm just doing that for clarity's sake. All right, so we've got A flat, an A flat triad on top, and then we have our C7 on bottom. Usually we're going to put these a little closer together, something like this. So we're putting the A flat in inversion. And this is our typical, if this is what we would usually, if someone says on a lead sheet just C7 alt, usually it's going to mean this version with the sharp 9 and the sharp 5. Right? And so that one's probably the most common one that you've heard in a lot of different places. But still a great sound. And then we have another one that's also quite common. This is our just major 6 upper structure. So that would be A major over our C7. And this one in particular, it gets our 13. I guess I'll put the flat 9 first. So it gets our flat 9, and then it also gets us a 13. Right? So once again, these are all spice blends. And we've got our 13th and our flat 9. Right? And we can voice these any way we like. But usually, the most common way is that our right hand is going to take the upper structure triad in some form, and then our left hand is covering the root, 3rd, and 7th. And if we're playing with the bass player, then we can leave out the root and just do... right? We can just play the 3rd and the 7th in our left hand, and then we can play the upper structure triad in our right hand. So... that's the 4th one, and then oh wait, no, that's it. Yeah, we got all 5. So, a really common way that people say to practice these, and I do think that there's some merit into this, that can be helpful, is just to pick a key. In this case, we've been doing C7, and just go 2, flat 3, flat 5, flat 6, and then 6. And then just kind of go through them. I don't really think this helps you feel how it feels to actually be in a song. When you play it like that, it really feels like a Star Wars movie or something. Right? It feels very, very John Williams-esque to put them that close to each other. But I think it's much more helpful to look at these in some contexts that we can figure out. So I haven't planned anything out here, but what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some ways that you could use these upper structure triads in a 2-5-1 chord progression. And so let's just start out with, we're going to stay in the same key. So let's just start out with a very straight up G minor 9 chord. And what I want to do is I want you to just look for opportunities to use one of these. So look at all the notes that you have here and see, once again, all of these are just combinations of different chords that you could do. So I just want to go from a standard G minor 9, and then we're going to do a C7, and we're going to kind of do a grab bag. We're going to pick which one we're going to practice. And we're going to go to C7, and then we're going to resolve to our F major 7. This is probably going to be the most structured that you could practice these. But just starting out with the ones that we did first, I'll use that because that's a little bit easier to see. So we have our 1 minor. So if I did that... So I'm doing G minor 9, just close position, all right there, root 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. And then I'm using my 1 minor, which is C minor triad, over my C7. And for now, I'm just going to keep defaulting to this root 3rd, 7th in the left hand, and then playing the triad, and then resolving it. So... I think it's okay. I think it's a little bit better if we can add something to it, which is why the first time I played it, I went up. And I think that's really nice. I think it would just depend on what the melody is, right? All of these are they're just combinations of feelings, right? Let's go to the next one, sharp 1 minor. So that's a C sharp minor triad on top of our C7. So I'm doing my very just straight out of the book G minor 9, root 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. And then this one's really, really common. Let me play that a few more times. So sharp, we're doing our G minor 9, very textbook, and then sharp 1 minor. And notice that because there's a third here, I actually don't need to play the third down. So I'm just playing a root and 7th. This would be probably the first one this is one of the first ones I would really want to learn. Really clearly, yeah. Oh. It's a major, sorry. All right, going on to the next one. So, G minor 9, then doing E flat minor on top of a C7. Once again, we're just doing root 3rd and 7th. And this one we do need the root 3rd and 7th because, well, I guess we technically could leave out the 7th. But we have no 3rd in this version, so I do think this is nice, and I would start off practicing this one like this. But do be aware that there are some nice options that you can use later where you do like this, and then now, because we've set up this expectation with this rising melody, we can resolve to something like this with the sharp 11, which is really nice. Right, really beautiful option. Okay, going on to the fourth one. This one I think is probably best done in this case with an inversion. So I'm going to do, I have D minor in my right hand, and then I'm going to F sharp minor in inversion. So if I'm thinking in terms of the F sharp minor, I'm going 5th, root, and 3rd. In the context of C, it's a flat 9, sharp 11, and a 13th. You can think about it either way, but I get comfortable with these. Really beautiful one. I always feel like there's a little bit of tragedy in that one. Right. I'm going to skip these honorable mentions for now, so you don't usually consider them. So now let's go on to our major triads that we can use on dominant chords. So we have G minor 9, right? And then I'm just going to move, all that changes is I move my F up to an F sharp, and I change there, and then I go to here. Right, really nice option. Okay, so let's go on to our next one, which is E flat major. So we have, once again, G minor 7, straight up, and then E flat major in the right hand, C7 in the left hand, and then back to our F major 9. Eventually, this one might be better served something like this. I think it's just a little bit interesting. Melody matters a lot with these chords. I know we talk about chords by themselves so much, but melody matters so much. Right, so take one of these ones that sounds a little bit less... a little lackluster by itself when we're just playing the chord horizontally. Give it a good melody, give it some nice voice leading, and it's just a new beast. It sounds great. And I think that one that I played was right. Same upper structure. I just changed. I put in an inversion. and then I did a little bit of voice leading, getting back to the F major 9. Okay, here is our flat 5 major upper structure triad, and we've got, right, so let's just try, if we did it, this is very similar to the F sharp minor. G flat major and F sharp minor are their neighbors, right? So here we'll try it as just in root position. So we've got this going to G flat major and then coming back down to the C major in the right hand. F major 9 is the full chord. I don't think that sounds great. I think we need a little bit more spicing up to do. So let's do a little bit of some voice leading to start out with. So I'm going from the D minor in the right hand to G flat major in the right hand. And then we can go back to our F major 9. So, and I can bring this G flat major, I can bring it up a half step to G major. We haven't really talked about upper structure triads on major chords, but this is a really nice one. Right, and then we have probably the most common one of all. We have our flat 6 upper structure triads. So if I'm just doing it just root position, chord to chord, right? D minor on top to A flat major on top to C major on top. But usually people are not playing it like that. Usually we're going to voice lead a little bit. We're doing this as an inversion. This is still A flat major. And then going on to finally our last one. We're doing 6, so this is going to be an A major triad. But once again, that's a really big jump, so we're going to voice lead as best we can. We can keep this A here, and we can just move these 2 notes down half step. It's a really common one. Okay, so that is that was a ton of different ways to not only use upper structure triads in your dominant chords, but like I said, it's so important to not see these as just things that you learn by themselves, but things that you need to work into a 2-5-1 progression. Figure out how you can use it into a tune, use it in a tune, and to get comfortable with it in the context of something else. If you don't do that, if you just kind of like drill them by themselves, it's not going to be a very effective way to learn upper structure triads. So I would recommend you go through this several times. I know I went through 5 different options for the major chords that you can use for upper structures on dominant chords, and then 4 really colorful options for minor chords, and then 2 honorable mentions that just add a little bit of color. But there are just so many ways that you can add color to your chords using upper structure triads. And I know I kind of like came up with it while we were doing this, but I really think that thinking of these as spice blends is a really important way to think about it. You know, and with spices, of course, we have all of these different spices that all have their characteristics. And we do need to kind of understand a little bit about each of those things. We do need to understand, you know, what's our ninth, what's our flat 9, what's our sharp 9. And we need to understand that before we start jumping into upper structure triads. But if you have that basic understanding of what those are and how they sound, then we can really speed up your process of learning how to combine these sounds by using upper structure triads. So it's awesome if you've made it this far. Like I said, this is my first live stream. It looks like I've gone a little bit over an hour, and I hope this has been helpful for you, for anyone that's watching. And if you are wanting to, work on your, if you're beginning or an intermediate jazz pianist, or maybe you're a pianist who has never played any jazz and you're really interested in these concepts, you want to go further. I have a membership called Freedom at the Piano Academy that's currently open for enrollment. And if it's not open for enrollment at the time that you're watching this, uh, then there'll be a wait list, or you can, of course, email me at the email that's on my YouTube channel to inquire about private lessons. I'd love to help and see how I can help you in your journey to become a more creative pianist. I've always felt that I come from a classical piano background, and then I switched, or rather, I started focusing more on jazz, partly through my journey, and I feel that every pianist should have the ability to improvise and to express themselves at the piano. So I am here on YouTube to help you do just that. And of course, if you have enjoyed this, make sure to give this video a like and give me a follow, and I'd love to help you out going forward.